That's the payout. And then as soon as Connor McDavid was named tournament MVP at 525, you can see the payout changes. And once the bet was settled, they just changed the amount of payout to like $4,100 or something.
The sportsbook has essentially the license to do anything to change the odds.
Not necessarily an isolated incident. We've seen stuff like this before, but at the same time, it's definitely a slap in the face. So.
The Behind the Lines podcast is proud to be sponsored by SX Bet, the world's most sophisticated crypto betting exchange. Millions traded every month with 0% fees, all on the chain. Never fight for a withdrawal. Your money is always yours using advanced wallet technology. Fair, transparent, and limitless. Bet on SX.
Welcome in. It's Behind the Lines, purifying sports betting, winning with SX. I'm Shane. We've got John Gosu Wilson in the house and special guest appearance from the Hawkeye himself, Tim Power, on today's show. NHL is back. 365 does someone dirty. We have the idea of mandatory monthly betting statements. And how are these two guys doing it when it comes to hoops? We're going to get into that in a little bit. But first, jam-packed show here, guys. Tim, thanks for joining on short notice. Really happy to have you. It was just going to be Gosu and I because we're giving Pace the week off as he recovers from Hawaii and makes his way back to Canada. But how are you, man? Great to see you.
Good. I feel really slighted, though. I was told I was coming on to talk UFC with KB, but I guess this will have to do.
Wow, that'll have to be like an in-person recording, where we could do a show like that. Me, you, KB, and he can just talk shit about us for an hour. I'm sure he'd love it.
Sounds like it's right up his alley.
Right up his alley, absolutely. All right, well, guys, let's get into it. Olympic hockey. Why don't we start there before we get into NHL and what we're going to be looking at? But guys, here we are. I'm a Canadian. You guys, two Americans over there. I should be hating you right now. I should have wanted to just quit on the show and not be doing it and, forget these. I don't want to talk to these guys. A lot of emotions attached to that game over the weekend. And I kind of, we knew it was going to be like that, but I don't know that if I anticipated it so much here on this side of the border at how much this would impact sort of many Canadians of all ages, shapes, sizes, etc. So just to give you a little snapshot here, in my house, we're not huge hockey fans. None of us really big hockey fans. My kids, sports fans, but not huge hockey fans. They were glued to both games, the women's and the men's. They woke up early to make sure that they watched this men's hockey game. They were up and out of bed on a Sunday morning before I was to catch this hockey game. Talking to people out in public afterwards, it was just the sadness, the overall depression from the loss, the way it happened. People just really, really felt that the emotions were high. How was it for you guys in the States? Were the emotions that prevalent as well, John?
At least not the people that I am close with in terms of sports fans and stuff. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't realize the game started at essentially 5 a.m. my time or whatever really it was, or 5:30 a.m. So I slept through the first two periods. I mean, I just didn't think that on a Sunday I needed to get up at 5 a.m. to watch this hockey game. So I mean, I get why they had to schedule it early, right? Because it's the last day of the Olympics or whatever. But I mean, I think you get excited about any time in the, your team, your country's trying to compete to win a gold medal or all, whatnot. So I mean, I think it's a big deal. But I don't, if the Americans had lost, it wouldn't have stung, I think, the way it stung for the Canadians, right? That's probably maybe the best way to sum it up. You're excited that you won, but I think Canada takes great pride in hockey. Especially it's a large nation in size, but in population, it's much smaller than the United States. And it's one thing that you can go toe to toe very easily and should win, most recently and stuff. So I get why it stings. It makes me sad every year. There's not a Canadian team that wins Stanley Cup. I know how devastating it is for a lot of people. So, but yeah, that's kind of my take on it. It was cool the Americans won, but I wasn't like jumping up and down about it.
Right. Yeah. Tim, how is it over there for you?
Kind of the same. I mean, what we, in the U.S., I guess a lot of the lead up is, talking about the miracle on ice. Like that's all that the Americans have when they talk about hockey is, something that happened, 40 plus years ago. Which that's, so that's kind of the U.S. side of it. And like John said, like if they lost, you kind of have that, I don't want to say mediocre, team feeling, but it's like not necessarily. It's almost a built-in expectation to a point that that you're not the best team. I mean, obviously you can look up and down those rosters, and they're both extremely tough. But I don't think anybody would argue that the Canadian roster was, I guess, all around a better squad. Obviously, you're happy that you win, and then you get to celebrate, poke fun, whatever you want with your comrades, so to speak. But yeah, I don't think like John said, I don't think it wouldn't have stung as much, as if the U.S. lost comparative to the Canadian side of things. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think we saw the emotions very prevalent in our Discord group as well, which we don't have to dive in too far there, but it was very clearly evident that people had a lot more than perhaps just money riding on this game. Just a lot of intensity, a lot of strong emotions behind it. Okay, but you mentioned it, how it stung for us here, and it certainly did. I want to get into. I want to highlight something where here's a bet on the Olympics that really stung for someone. I got to share this with you guys here because I think it's worth just bringing up and mentioning and kind of highlighting because we see this kind of stuff all the time, but I think the general public out there doesn't experience it the way we do. So let me share this reel that someone posted on Instagram here, and we'll make sure you guys can hear it too.
Okay, so I need someone to help explain this sports betting with Bet365 mystery. So before the Olympic Games, this bet was placed on Bet365 on the app. This parlay for Connor McDavid to be the all-time points leader at the tournament for men's hockey and to win tournament MVP. You can see it's for $667. Payout is 25 grand. Obviously, incredible odds. It was before the tournament even started, and we were all stoked about it. And then come to the yesterday morning, and you can see here 8:14. It's still saying that that's the payout. And then as soon as Connor McDavid was named tournament MVP at 5:25, you can see the payout changes. And once the bet was settled, they just changed the amount of payout to like $4,100 or something. They just did that out of nowhere. Is that not insane? Is that illegal? Is that just a really bad betting app thing, or are we missing something here? Is there some app, or is there some rule to the app or to the parlay that we aren't understanding? We're emailing them and asking for correspondence and to understand. They already said that their settlement department approves it. So we're like at a loss for words, and we're trying to figure out what we missed here because this just seems like a full-on fraud at this point. So please, if you are an expert in sports betting or using apps or Bet365, please chime in because I would love to understand how this happened.
All right. So I think a few things going on here, and you can see if you're a sports betting expert who's over here right away commenting our guy. So you can see that Pace is chiming in here, and he's the one who flagged this for me. So still contributing to the show, even though he's got the week off here. But okay, guys, let's take a look at this here. Reduces the payout from 25,000 all the way down to like 4,000 and something. Okay, now you can tell that right off the bat. It's a 2-leg parlay, 7.5 to 1 for Connor McDavid, total point scorer, goals and assists, and Connor McDavid to win MVP. Correlated bet right off the bat here, right, guys? Obviously correlated. Now the multiplier, when she places the bet, she's getting the 7.5 times 5, times the amount that she bet, 667, to arrive at that $25,000 payout. But then it becomes pretty clear that she only ended up getting about 6.5, 6.5 on her actual payout in that 4,000 range there, which is even less than the one single bet of McDavid paying out 7.5 to 1 to be the top point scorer. What do you guys think happened here?
Well, I think I might have missed this part, but what environment is she in? Like the regulated environment? Like do we know what area she's in?
Yeah, she's definitely not in Canada.
Gotcha.
Okay. She's definitely not in Ontario. I don't know if she's elsewhere in Canada or in another or in a state. It's unclear exactly where she is. But yeah, it doesn't appear that she's in a regulated, at least in Ontario, with the regulated province.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, if she's in the United States, in a regulated environment, I've had stuff like this happen on regulated books as well, where there's a clause where in almost all the regulated states it says if there's clear and obvious error, right? Then the sportsbook has essentially whatever license to do anything to change the odds. You know, I mean, I've had bets completely voided, not paid, right? And it's not even things that are past posted. It's just simply like if the odds are just mispriced, quote unquote, and who decides whether they're mispriced? You know, is it because it's different than the market? Is it because, what if they're the only book that's offering something? Then it could be anything. They could just say that it's always been mispriced, like the entire time. There's no other way to, I've bet things that were the same odds at every other book. And I've sent that to regulators and they've sided with the book and said they didn't have to pay me because it was an obvious error. And everybody was wrong, apparently. Just everybody was wrong about the odds of something. I'm like, well, yeah, they were. That's why I bet it. And that's why I made money. That's the whole point. So, that piece of regulation, I think, has really given the books a lot of sway to basically do anything they want like this. And so I'm honestly I'm not surprised. I kind of jokingly argue back and forth with some people in our community sometimes on whether the regulated books actually have the ability to take more of your money, but in a more wink, wink, nod, nod kind of way than a lot of the offshores. At least in an offshore book steals my money, they've just stolen it. They've just locked the account and I can't get the money anymore. The regulated books will typically void bets here and there or change the price of something that I won, that sort of thing. It's a little more undercover stuff, but the volume's higher. So yeah, no, totally not surprised and definitely not surprised it's 365.
Yeah, definitely not surprised it's 365 doing this kind of thing. What did shock me is that I thought for sure that, okay, these are correlated bets. They obviously didn't do the multiplier correctly, like 365 didn't. They probably should have given, something significantly lower in terms of odds. But to then make the payout even less than the 7.5 of Connor McDavid,
right,
that to me is nuts. And yeah, they probably could have avoided the whole thing. So Hannah over here, might just want to take her winnings and move on and kind of leave it because they could have avoided the whole thing, which we know a lot of other books would do, and we've seen that happen. But to not even pay out the 7.5 to me is nuts. Tim, have you ever had anything like this happen to you? And what advice would you offer to Hannah?
Yeah, I'm sure I've had something similar happen, but I was doing the same thing as you were reading it there. I was like, the math doesn't even math out here. I'm not sure exactly what happened. It's almost like there's a clerical error somewhere. I don't know. I agree with you. Probably take your money and move on. But the real question is that second picture that she showed. It doesn't look like the odds on either one of those two bets changed. So where did they get that? Where did their math or their calculation come from in the first place? So, just seems like a not necessarily an isolated incident. We've seen stuff like this before, but at the same time, it's definitely a slap in the face. So.
Yeah, and it's definitely ridiculous that the sportsbook doesn't give any explanation. She's reaching out, she's trying to find out what went wrong. They're just like, yeah, this is what our settlement department said. And that's it. It's like you got to give her some explanation. And if you're going to be doing this to bettors, I think we're just going to see more and more of this stuff on social media as it sort of as average recreational bettors kind of get their eyes opened to what the sports books do and the kind of shady shit they're capable of. I think we'll just get more and more of stuff like this.
Yeah, there's definitely different jurisdictions have regulators that are more interested in helping players, or I don't even know if it's necessarily, I'm not trying to be cynical. I don't even know if it's necessarily helping players. I think it's just like understanding the environment. I think most regulating bodies in the United States specifically don't understand how this industry works. I think once every few months we get a new story about a state looking into player limiting and like trying to understand why players are getting limited. Like they honestly don't know. I think a lot of people, a lot of regulators actually don't know that this happens, that they honestly think that only people getting limited are people with gambling problems, when in fact the opposite is true, and those people will get their accounts unlocked to bet more. So it's I'm not surprised that that there's probably little recourse here with the regulator involved. So
yeah, as somebody who's used iGaming before, it's great to have as a resource, as something to use as a tool when negotiating with sportsbooks about stuff, and trying to get payments or trying to, do things and being like, well, I'll go to the regulator, because they do take it seriously. Sportsbooks, when you bring up the regulator and you start asking, in Ontario, we have to ask for a complaint number. As soon as the sportsbook realizes that, one, that there's a regulator you can go to, two, the process of going to that regulator, which is first asking for the complaint number, then they quickly come around and attitudes shift very quickly. And so I think that's kind of a benefit of the regulator. But I also think you're right, John, that a lot of times the regulators themselves don't understand the space they're regulating. And that's been revealed quite often here on the show. Yeah.
And that is a really good point. Definitely should concede that just the fact that you bring up regulation to the book typically can help. That's true in the United States. More so was true when there were more providers. Now that all of the little, the fan kings and the draft duels of the world, like they pretty much have a duopoly, right? And so like all of the books that most people are using are just totally aware and ubiquitous of all these rules. And so, it's like, it helps though especially in the early days of regulation here. And I know you guys have so many books in Ontario. You definitely got some shady providers there. We used to have some that were like outsourcing stuff to some offshores, and they were not paying very quickly or well. And, and it did help to go to the regulator and say, hey, like I've actually put in a complaint that you owe me a lot of money, and you're slow rolling me on these verification processes. Right.
Right.
So yeah, you're right about that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Well, John, you've got some hockey futures for us. Why don't we get to some of that? We did NBA last week. For anybody out there that wants to know what John's NBA futures are, go back, have a look at last week's episode. We get into a whole lot of conversation there about what the season looks like as after the All-Star break, and now same thing with the NHL. They're coming back from the Olympics. We got the NHL back this week. Very much looking forward to that. So, John, what are we looking at though long term here in terms of hockey? How do you see the season playing out, and what kind of futures bets do you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, so I definitely am not as in tune with hockey, with the NHL, as I am the NBA, especially when it comes to maybe the nuanced things around the edges, like how voters vote on awards and stuff like that. Like the NBA, I have a really pretty firm understanding of the people that are voting, the mindset of the voters. And it can kind of identify some value. They also have that rule in the NBA about playing 65 games, which I'm kind of, we've talked last week about potentially leveraging that as a point of value that a lot of the markets are not properly factoring in. So in the NHL, a lot of that is a bit of a mystery to me. I will say that by and large, I find that the NHL is very similar to baseball, the MLB, where I feel like the voters, there's more of like a pragmatist type of style of voting, where it's like, like the losing player winning awards and stuff in hockey. Like that's kind of, in baseball, players win individual awards who are on bad teams. It's kind of just more, it's less about like the team. Whereas in basketball, I think there's just so much of an emphasis that the best player on a team can truly elevate a team, because there's so much of, when you play 40 minutes a game in basketball, you're playing almost 20% of your team's minutes. In hockey, you're one of 5 skaters on the ice, and you're shifting, a third of the game, perhaps, if you're on that front line, right? So your overall contribution is technically lower. So just all that kind of out of the way. an overview of the standings. The one thing that I'll point out, like I tend, when I look at these awards coming out of like all-star breaks and stuff, I do tend to look basically what was like the middle third of the season, like, so like that 25 to 27 game sample right before the all-star break. This is a weird year with this huge break with the Olympics, right? So I'm factoring that in for sure, but it's, you know, if there's momentum, quote unquote, gain, it's not like the NBA or the traditional NHL all-star break where it's not even a week off and then you come back and you're playing again. You know, this is a long time off for some of these guys. And then some teams have star players that have sustained injury in the Olympics. You know, like the Kings, I think lost a guy for the season and stuff. So, you know, like there's things like that to factor in. The very first thing that stood out to me was that I think Colorado wasn't playing their best hockey. They looked like they were just by and far the most dominant team in the league, right? The first third of the season. And then they kind of lost some strange games. They still are third in goal differential in that last 25 games or so, with 26, the positive 26 there, which is the thing I look at the most outside of like points and standings in the NHL. It's important, but I think we all understand that like the incentive to go to overtime to get that point and then still getting a point for going to overtime is kind of just skews some things with the standings a little bit. So goal differential to me is really important to look at. So Colorado has the fourth easiest schedule remaining in the league. They get to play the Canucks. They play the Blues twice, the Flames 3 times, the Jets 3 times, the Blackhawks twice. They have a really, really easy schedule.
Wow.
For such a really good team. So it's hard for me to find any value on things like the President's Trophy and stuff like that. One place that I did think was interesting though, one market was the Hart Trophy, so like the MVP essentially, for those who don't know. So Kucherov on Tampa you can get at plus 700 right now. So in the last 25 games he has had 57 points, and the next highest is Connor McDavid with 44. So he was on a tear heading into the Olympics. Tampa has the best goal differential in that time. They're plus 39 in that span. The next highest is Buffalo, plus 29. So they've been on fire. Their schedule is one of the tougher ones remaining, but most teams in the East play a tough schedule because of the way the middle to higher tier teams are scheduled out there and just how many more points they have. So I'm basing this off of points in that. So plus 700, he's I think he's like the co-favorite for the Art Ross Trophy, which is the most points in the league. And Tampa is like only plus 500, plus 600 for the President's Trophy. So you're telling me that his odds, so he could lead the league in points, they say about 50% of the time. And then you're saying less than the time that he's the MVP, they have the best record, despite playing a pretty difficult schedule down the stretch. He can win the award without having the best record, right? By just having a ton of more points than everybody else. So to me, the plus 700 on him to win that trophy is value. But again, I don't have a lot of understanding of like the mindset of the voters, but just from like lining up all of the other odds that surround that market that are adjacent to that market, the plus 700 there seems like a good bet to me. And I think it's just because McKinnon is minus 200 essentially. Out there, right? So he's sucking in a lot of the odds there, and it would be hard for Colorado to not have the best record. I think they're minus 400 for the President's Trophy, but I like that big number with more than one way to, I think, weasel your way into being the vote there. Right.
Wow, I love it. At plus 700. I mean, you know, what would you put the actual probability of him winning it at?
I mean, if I'm basing it around like a composite where like, if they get the best record and he's within 5 goals or 5 points, of, you know, having the most points, you know, let's say McDavid gets the most or McKinnon has the most, but they have the best record and he's just within that number, he probably wins. Right. And then there's the, you know, what if they're only a point or two back or a few points back of Colorado, but he's, you know, 15 points ahead of Nathan McKinnon, you know, it's like, I think you win in that scenario. So, I mean, it's like you kind of weigh those things together. I'd say it's probably 20-25% chance that he wins. So to me, this is, you know, a pretty high value proposition. So
yeah, love it. Love it. That's awesome. Okay, cool, John. Anything else that you're looking at futures wise?
Yeah, I feel like I just have to have a team to cheer for in both conferences.
Always, right?
Yeah, this is like less value. Maybe there's probably still value on these numbers because they're big numbers. But I do like some interesting long shots to win each conference. So
Okay.
in the East, I like Buffalo at 20-1. So Buffalo plays the seventh toughest schedule remaining. But like I said, almost all the teams at the top in the East play a tough schedule. From here on out, they're all like in the top half of the league. So it's not that much of a difference really. And like I mentioned earlier, they're second in point, goal differential in the last 25 games with plus 29. They're only a handful of points back in the standings. So you could actually get, I think if they continue to play well, you're going to gain value on the number before you get into the playoffs. Right. So I think there's a lot to like. I mean, they have a top 7, tied for top 5 goalie in terms of save percentage in leagues. It's another thing I like to look at. So I like Buffalo at 20-1 to win the East.
Okay.
And in the West, I like Utah. So basically similar logic in all of these, except Utah plays a really easy schedule. They play the 6th easiest schedule remaining in the West, so likely that they'll climb the standings a little bit, which we kind of need them to do because they're kind of on like the fringe of the playoffs right now. In the West, they're also 20-1 out there. You can get like on FanDuel right now, 20-1 for Utah. Again, same story, top 5 goalie and save percentage in the last 25 games, plus 24 goal differential. So they've come on despite a little bit of a slower start. So it's 2 teams at 20-1 to win their respective conference that are checking a lot of boxes to me in terms of the teams that all look similar. So,
all right. So it's Kucherov for the Hart Trophy at 8-1.
Mm-hmm.
8-1, right? And then a couple 20-1 plays here with the Buffalo Sabres and the Utah Bags or Utah Mammoth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes. Maybe we got to drop the bags on them. Do we have to lose that nickname? Is it time to
I
shed
think
it?
you get a lot of. You might get as much anger in our community as you found on Sunday morning.
Oh no!
If you suggest that. So
okay, I'll prepare for the hate coming my way. All right, fun stuff there. Okay, moving on, guys. So we got to talk about hoops now. You guys have been crushing it, both of you. Everybody who's in our Discord and in the IPL community, even those who maybe are not in the community but have joined for a couple of streams, chances are they've seen either one of you or both of you absolutely dominating when it comes to basketball. Gosu, you've been crushing it on the NBA side. Like, I think the stream on Friday, you went undefeated. You've just been smashing. You smashed all weekend long. It's just honestly incredible. And then Hawkeye, for you, it's, you've got a lot more volume that you're dealing with on the college front. But you've been smashing on college hoops, and you go on some incredible runs of, winning 5, 6, 7, 10 bets in a row, before taking your first L. So, since I've got both of you guys on here, I thought, wow, for those who are in the IPL community that are watching you guys do this, they've got to be wondering, like, how are they doing this? And then how can they get to that level? And if they're, for all of our audience members who aren't in inplayLIVE or haven't been following along, just know that these guys have been smashing it. You can go and look at the records that are posted online and the daily tracking sheets that get posted and are out there. So you guys can go take a look at that just to sort of back it up and see or verify these claims, if you will, because it's really, truly impressive. So Hawkeye, why don't we start with you a little bit? What can you share with our audience members about how you're doing this and finding such success in college hoops right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when it kind of goes back to when I got into the, the community in general, like, I guess I'm an older member, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. But my background is very, I guess, laced in data mining, spreadsheet analysis, data analysis, numbers, that's statistics. Like a lot of, granted, I went to school 20 years ago. I graduated in 2000, go Hawks. But the data side of it, or the really trying to find an edge from, data that currently exists, has always been at my core. And I think that's one of the things that, I personally do, I guess, well or better than others, if you will. And it's one of the things that I bring to the community. And I know John is, very similar from maybe even a different angle, but a very similar perspective, I guess, if you will. So when I'm attacking any sport, but basketball specifically, when I've got a very, large number of games in front of me, I'm trying to do everything I can to isolate the games that, potentially have an edge, whether that's looking at the difference in score, who's leading, who's trailing, the pace of the game, things along those lines is really, the statistical side of it is really what I guess gets my juices going. So,
right. And what are you using? Like, how do you analyze the games? How do you determine if there's an edge on these games and narrow that down?
Yeah. So, in the past, I used to use a number of things, and, any of us have our own setups or whatever. And like right now I've got, 7 or 8 screens in front of me that I use, when I'm in the zone, so to speak. And what I found with basketball specifically is, a lot of times you have the game up on one screen or maybe multiple games on the screen. I'll have like the ESPN scoreboard up, with the scores and, first half, second half. Sometimes you're, clicking into the game cast or the box score to find, specific statistics on that particular game. Obviously, you're looking at the sports books to find the odds, things along those lines. So you've got all these different, avenues of stuff that, you're kind of looking at all at once. And, maybe not everybody has access to that screen space or can, focus on a number of things at one time. So as time has evolved, I've tried to, I guess, build myself a tool essentially that kind of, aggregates and compiles that stuff into one place. So I can kind of focus my energy in one spot. And that helps me a lot to, eliminate, potential games that I'm not looking at. So games that are outside of a certain, score differential, or games that, the pace is extremely low or extremely high. I may not be looking at a specific strategy and, in one of those perspectives, but having, I guess, what I call my dashboard in front of me that basically, helps me isolate those games, sort them by whatever I prefer. My personal opinion is I prefer to sort them by time left, so I know which games are ending sooner. Obviously, a lot of what we do is very time sensitive, so I tend to focus, bottom up, if you will, so the games that are going to end the soonest, and then kind of work backwards from there. And I have kind of a different strategy that I apply at different time intervals. When it's inside the 4 to 5 minute mark, we're looking at totals, but then once we get inside that 4 minute mark, sometimes the totals apply, but then you start looking at minuses, money lines, things along like those lines. So games kind of fall into different buckets, as the time progresses. And obviously on a busy Saturday, you might have 100 plus games, and you get 30, 40, 50 games coming in, maybe at, an hour or half an hour time interval. So it's kind of a reciprocal process, over and over again. So like you said, you can run through 5, 10, winners in a row, and it's not uncommon to see 5 or 10 losers in a row in some cases. But if you apply the same logic, across the board and try to isolate those games in the same way, I think the stuff I look for, it's obviously been successful. So.
Yeah, you're definitely coming out ahead, and 5 losers in a row does happen here and there, but it's become very uncommon. You're tending to go 5, 6 winners in a row, and then you drop a loser here and there, and then you go another 5, 6 winners in a row and drop a couple losers. Well, great work there, Tim. John, on your side, you're dealing with less volume overall. I mean, an NBA slate is a big NBA slate's 10 games. Which would be a totally tiny slate on the college hoops side of things. Mm-hmm. So what are you doing, and how are you kind of zoning in on these great wagers?
Yeah, I think part of it is leveraging the small slate to actually have eyes on the game. I probably there's only maybe 1 or 2, like you said, like a busy slate. I think like we're recording this on Tuesday. I think there's 10 games tonight, and I'll probably have eyes on all but 1 or 2 of those games throughout the course of the night and watch as much as I can of that. And I think, part of it is just understanding that I'll always say this. I know I've said this much time in this podcast. Your biggest advantage as a sports bettor is that you don't have to bet every game, but the sports books have to bet every game, right? So the problems you're trying to solve are inherently different. They're trying to create a method that wins about 50% of the time on both sides across thousands and tens of thousands of games across years and years, right? And when you're able to find outlying games or matchups where two teams kind of mirror each other in the way they play and find things that are going to beget a certain way of play, then you're able to do that and take advantage of it. And so, you can use a lot of data like Tim mentioned, or, and you can also match that up with what you're seeing. Right. And so it's, there's, maybe situations like you could just take an example. I'm just going to spitball numbers. This isn't real, but it's like to say the Thunder have only lost by more than 10, like 5 or 6 times in this year, or maybe probably not even that many, right? It's like 4 or 5 times, but and so that's like not a statistically significant number, but what you can do is take, okay, well, how did they play in those games with, from a data standpoint, how fast were the possessions, all of that. And it's easy to just say, well, that's an outlier because it's only, it's just a handful of games. You can't base anything off that. But then if you take that and you just go line it up and you watch the game, you watch the last 5 minutes of those games, you'll watch the whole fourth quarter of those games and they're losing. Like, how do they play differently than when they're winning? And you can see a lot of stark contrasts, right? And that's probably true for every team. That's true across all sports, every sport. I mean, it's, if you're dealing with, small sample sizes, you have to be qualitative, and football is the most popular sport anybody bets on. It's all small sample sizes. It takes half a decade to play as many NFL games as you play in one season of the NBA, so you have to, anything that's data driven, you have to line up with your eyes. So that's what we do. And I just look for outliers, look for strange games, look for scores that are crazy. And it's, whether it's underdogs blowing people out or if it's big favorites blowing people out, and how those games play out differently, all that kind of stuff. So just focusing in one game at a time and analyzing it, not being afraid to pass. Those are the secrets to success.
Hey, great stuff there, John. Are you using tools like Tim is? Like, do you have something that's helping you?
Yeah, like I said, I look at data, look at how teams play in certain situations throughout the game. I'll give like a very specific instance of something I was doing last year that was very profitable. I think a lot of the sharp books have actually figured out. So, last year I was really looking at matchups and I was looking at on-offs of players on the floor. So let's take, Jokic, for example. It's like the most impactful on-off player in the NBA, right? Well, let's say they won the first quarter by 5 and their second quarter spreads -3.5. Well, he doesn't play the first 6 minutes of the second quarter typically, right? So one thing that was really profitable last year was just betting the other team that they're playing against on the first half plus when the second quarter starts. And then 80 to 90% of the time, you're ahead on that number when Jokic checks back in the game and you just middle out of it, right? Or if you're so far ahead, you just let it ride. And I think the books, especially the sharp books, have really done a good job of figuring that kind of stuff out over the last year or so. That stuff hasn't been that successful this year. And I think you actually see a lot of those numbers where they actually load the spread and the point total and stuff like 2 different times in the game, or maybe they're just basing it off of actual live data of who's playing in the game instead of the pregame number. So that's just an example of, using like not really even a small sample size, but just a compartmentalized piece of the game and using the data and the history of those matchups as on-offs to judge and handicap the game for like a specific span of time. And like I said, I think that's an edge that was short-lived. I'm sure there were people who were doing it long before I was, but the books seem to have kind of caught up to that. So,
well, they always catch up, they always adjust, and then it's our job as bettors to readjust and move on and look for new ways to win. But kudos to both of you for really sort of guiding the IPL community through this hoops season. You guys are just crushing it, and there's still so much ahead and so much to be excited for. So I'm really looking forward to that, especially as we head into March coming up just around the corner, and conference tournaments and all of that for college hoops. Hawkeye, I know you'll be streaming for some long days, or at least we hope to see you streaming for some long days.
Gotta arrange it with the boss to get some time off of work.
Yeah, exactly. You'll have to check in and book some time there. Awesome, guys. Great stuff. All right, I want to move on to news and notes, and I do have a bit of news to share with you. And this I think impacts you guys in the States more than it impacts us over here in Canada. But this a little bit of reporting coming from a friend of the show, Robert Linehan, who we've had on, and for anybody out there who wants to follow along with industry news, specifically in the sports betting industry, this guy's a great follow. And he's always on top of all of the latest news, and I'm often sharing his work here on the podcast. But here's a story that he's come out with. New York considering mandatory monthly sports betting statements for customers. So this was put forward by a New York Assembly member, Rebecca Casse. Introduced this bill that would require online sports betting operators to electronically provide monthly invoice statements to customers about their betting activity. So here's what would be in it. Okay. According to the bill, this is what they would have to provide: total amount of deposited funds in a month, total amount bet during a month, total winnings, total losses, net gain loss incurred, total number of bets placed, total amount of time sports bettor was logged into the betting platform, itemized account of any promotional credits, bonuses, free bets, prominent and clear disclosure of responsible gaming resources, and access to the authorized sports bettor's lifetime wagering history. Wow, guys. Now, I know for bettors like you guys, you've got all of this. You already know all of this. You've got it all. You're keeping track of it somewhere already. But certainly the average bettor most likely is not. Recreational bettor is definitely not. But I'm wondering, does this tie into taxes because you guys are under a new tax regime there? Would it be helpful? Would it be a hindrance? Is this something you want, something you don't want? What do you think? Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, when you sent that to me earlier, I read through that and I was like, man, I was just preparing stuff for my accountant, and I would love to fucking have a statement that shows me all that information so that I didn't have to go dig it up myself. Obviously, I keep track of my bets, but I imagine, the average professional bettor, if they, they're trying to, round that information up, having that at their fingertips would be nice, because obviously you can find that stuff, via your sports book. But they definitely don't make it the easiest thing to find, and that's for obvious reasons. They don't necessarily want people to know how much they're depositing or losing, or spending time on their app or whatever it might be. So yeah, I mean, I get where they're coming from. I think this is probably the idea of this is to give people a little bit more visibility and ownership in what they're actually doing, and maybe curb some bad habits, if you will. But I'm sure the sports books are on the flip side of that, where they don't necessarily want that. So I guess it's a two-way street there. But like I said, for me personally, if someone was to send me that information where I had it easily accessible, I sure wouldn't mind. But I think I fit into a different basket than most. So
yeah, for sure. John?
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to have that information. That was the thing when I read it. I just thought, well, I think you can go get this stuff. Like Tim said, it's not like in an easy way to go find it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that like telling people how much they've lost is really like going to do much to stop people from doing it, Right. So I don't know. I mean, again, it's kind of like the regulator. I think they're just a little out of touch with this industry as a whole. But it would be interesting if they, let's say, you mentioned the tax things. I know when Gary was on, we talked about like sessions and all that kind of stuff. It would be interesting if there became a standard of, monthly win-loss statements. It's like, well, if that's the standard, then is that a session? And then because then there's some kind of like precedent for having months clearly defined as like a break point to divvy out your win-loss. You know what I mean? And it's a little more in line of, but at least it's closer to an actuality of how I think about what, quote unquote session is, which is really, either on a weekly, monthly, or a season long basis for stuff. Like I typically don't count my money at the table until the season's over for a sport, so it's like, to me, it's like the closer we can start getting to that, if these new tax rules are going to hang on, then that's better for me.
Yeah. I would imagine that this would be helpful come tax time, but you're right. That whole definition of what is a session is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And, how can the sports books and the operators kind of find a way to work with the lawmakers and regulators to, arrive at a consensus around that term and that idea.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, great stuff there, guys. All right. Moving on. Our final segment of the show here, upcoming hype. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention that baseball spring training has started. And they're back out there already. It feels like just yesterday I was about to celebrate the Blue Jays winning the World Series. It would really just feel like it would just happen, and safe at home. And we all cheered for a moment until that umpire did this.
That's because baseball's like 10 months long.
Yeah, it's forever. It just doesn't. They might as well run it all season at this point. But it's crazy to me to think that baseball is just about back. And Tim, you are you started making calls in inplayLIVE starting with baseball at a sort of a time when a lot of other people are kind of checking out of sports betting, and they're like, oh, all right, I'm going to take a break for the summer and all that. You're like, no, baseball's here, and you're ready to grind. So, how are you feeling with spring training? Back in session.
I feel good. Last year was kind of our first, real, full season of, calling things, primarily towards the end of the season or middle end of the season. It was all live. We tried to mix some pregame in there, but early in the season pregame, unfortunately, dug us a hole. Which is probably not uncommon with baseball in general, but we try to find our edges where we can. And the previous season, that's kind of where I got my start, if you will. And again, a lot of that's data driven. In a sport that's hard to make money at, or a lot of people either don't bet for obvious reasons or whatever. I wanted to try to find something that was useful. And with the help of a couple other guys, we've dug up basically just taken the data that's available to everybody and then kind of compiled in our own way to show us, potential advantages on, teams that, may, do well in situations where they're, down a half of an inning. You might be able to, covering minuses, run to gives, no next runs, things along those lines. Like everybody seems to have, there's obviously teams that are at the top of that heap and bottom of that heap, much like any sport. And so that's kind of where things went last year. And so I'm excited to get back into that this year. Obviously I think we're going to, have to get a good 6 or 8 weeks under our belt to get that data kind of clicking. Cause every baseball season's new. You got players that have moved around, and, trying to, use last year's data, right out of the gate with some of these teams is just, futile. It's just not, the right, way to look at it. So, but yeah, I'm excited. We did last year. We did some baseball futures, and overall did fairly well. I looked it up earlier. We went. I think it was either 8 for 10 or 7 for 9 on win totals. So that's something we might want to discuss. Here in the next couple of weeks. I know John does a lot of futures, and I think we did really well with those last year. And I plan on putting a little bit more effort into the win total side of baseball as opposed to just some of the weird stuff, your home runs and stolen bases and stuff like that, which we basically broke even on. So.
Interesting. John, are you going to be doing these futures too for baseball?
I mean, I'll whatever Tim posts, I'll certainly follow. I have not, the methodology I use for the other sports I don't know that football certainly doesn't translate. Basketball is probably closer, but I don't have a good enough knowledge of the league in terms of how to expect which pitchers are going to pitch certain amount of innings for certain teams, and trying to factor all that kind of stuff in, right? Because it's baseball is a tough sport to get an edge on because it's literally all probability, because almost no events are connected to each other in any meaningful way. Like the only thing that's remotely connected is a runner's on and the pitcher's flustered because the runner's on or something. Like it's just, as someone who played a lot of baseball my entire life, it's just, whether I get a hit or not, the next guy comes up and gets a hit. It's just, they're basically disparate events. So it's just different. But I'll definitely follow what he's doing. I do plan to try to do a little bit more pregame baseball. I've been posting a lot more pregame stuff in our community. There's a lot of, if you can win, it's great. If you break even, that's great too, because you're playing money through. It helps with those rollovers, helps you get bonuses. If you're losing, then it's the glass half full, where maybe your account, you get a little bit more longevity there, So the goal is to win, but even when you're not, there's still an upside. So I do plan to do some pregame baseball.
Love it. When is the best time to start betting baseball? When would you advise the average, bettor to sort of, all right, let's start paying attention here? Tim, you had said, you're going to wait about 6 to 8 weeks. John, when would you typically want to start looking at baseball? What's the ideal time?
That's what that's a good time frame. I'll typically start betting yes and no run first inning type wagers around the beginning of May 1st.
Okay.
Because then you got about 25 games from every team, like for hitters, and then you've got about 5 starts for every pitcher, which, those 5 starts is not a great sample size, but I'll just start a little smaller there and then just ramp up as the season goes on. So May, I'll probably start betting those around May. And then other stuff like certain pregame things, there'll be things I'll just start betting immediately. And if I think that there's like historical evidence for betting certain things, like if there's a trend that says, hey, a team's lost 5 straight, but they've scored 10 runs in every game, or they've scored 5 runs in every game, they're as a money line dog, they're paid. There's stuff like that. It's like just spans the test of time. I'll always just start betting those as soon as the season starts, in terms of like trying to model things and actually try to find value on a line based on like independent, modeling. It'd probably be mid-May.
Right. Okay. And Tim, you sort of, mentioned that the beginning of the season didn't work out so well, dug a bit of a hole in baseball before climbing out of it. When would you advise people to start really kind of looking at baseball if they're interested?
Yeah, so to John's point, I think there are things that you can bet early in the season, and there were some strategies that we, deployed early in the season that did work. A few did not. There are some inefficiencies in the markets early in the season, specifically when you look at potentially game totals, even money lines. Maybe coupling those with like a player to get a hit or things along those lines. There's a few strategies that we look at that again kind of make you look gray, if you will, to the books, but have some value, I guess, as far as the overall scheme of things is concerned. So there are some things that early in the season you can look at, but yeah, as far as like John said, as far as modeling and getting yourself into things that actually have some meat on the bones, if you will, that he's exactly right, that 25 to 30 game mark is pretty good. Pitchers 5+ games. I like 10 personally, but obviously you got to wait nearly half the season to get 10 starts under your belt. So but you can definitely handicap yourself a little bit when you're looking at you just have to be careful when I've always told people, like, if you're looking at a pitcher that is 5-0 after 5 games, you kind of have to look at it as more like 5-1, or maybe even they kind of add a loss in there, if you will, from a percentage standpoint. Otherwise, you could get yourself in some trouble where you see these guys that are on paper 100%, if you will. So your theoretical probabilities kind of get thrown off a little bit if you're not careful. But yeah, it's I think money can be made, theoretically the entire season, but I think that May 1st. Maybe even mid-May, it seems to make the most sense. And I know from what IPL does or what from the community does, we've got basketball and hockey playoffs that kind of run through May and into the beginning of June. So it's kind of a nice transition. Once, we kind of start ramping up with baseball and start kind of tailing off with other sports, it's kind of a nice transition there. And then, the rest of the summer is kind of the baseball only thing until we get back to, football in August. So,
Hey, don't forget about the CFL.
Oh yeah, the CFL.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and
All right, guys,
WNBA. Hey, WNBA.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
WNBA too. Yeah.
The RIP to some of the CFL.
Yeah.
It's gonna, unfortunately, they're moving a little bit towards like a watered down American football.
They don't know what they want to be right now. Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll have to talk a lot more about that when the season rolls back around. Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. Great stuff today. Thanks so much for joining, Tim. Really happy to have you on the show, sharing some of your insights. And Gosu, you're always you're becoming a bit of a staple here on the show, and we love you for it. So thanks.
Not a problem, Shane. I'm just disappointed that you told me that we were going to talk about hockey and then didn't even ask my opinion, but that's probably a good thing. So.
My bad, man. I didn't realize you had a lot of hockey that you wanted to share.
I didn't, but I think John brought up a good point when you talk about what voters look at and vote for and stuff like that. And I mean, this is all stuff that I kind of read in preparation for today. So there's nothing new here. But a guy like Celebrini would be somebody to look at for the Hart Trophy. I think he's like 4-1 right now. I think the narrative there can really be derived from obviously his Olympic success could be a slingshot, towards, something even better, I guess, if you will. And I think, there's a realistic chance that the Sharks could make the playoffs. And if they do, he has double the points of any other guy on their team. So I think like he would obviously take a brunt of that success. So, at 4-1, that's where my money's at for the Hart Trophy. And then my long shot for the Stanley Cup would be the Wild. So, I think they're like 20-1 right now. John, made mention of the last 25 games, and I think they were 16-4-5 in their last 25 games. So, and arguably have the best 1-2 punch, maybe not the best, but the best 1-2 punch at goalie with Gustafsson and Wallstead. So,
wow. All right. Well, look, there we go, Tim. We got your hockey picks in too. It fit them into the show after all. Love it. Great stuff.
I try.
You tried, and you delivered, and there we go. We can now track it. We can put it on the tracker, Tim, and see how it does.
Yeah, which tracker though?
Yeah, the podcast tracker, the podcast.
All right.
There we go. All right, guys, lots of fun, great stuff. Thanks again for joining. So to Hawkeye, to Gosu, to Pace, who's in transit, and to all of you sports bettors out there tuning in from around the world. Till next week. Keep beating those buttons. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join in Play Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.